On this episode of Alaska Means Business, we sit down with Alaskan YouTuber Fred Roehl. Fred is a Curyung Tribal Council member, an avid Alaskan outdoorsman, and the survivor of an incredible incident.
And when I panned over to the left with that spotlight, we saw 3 sets of eye shine that were like fence post markers, bright red, boom, boom, boom. Immediately, we stepped right back inside, and I put the 30-06 in the skiff. He didn't cut the line, and I'm yelling at him, throw me my knife, throw me my knife. And when it looked at me, I immediately knew what food felt like.
After his harrowing experience and over many years and much research, Fred has evolved into a digital journalist, and his beat is taking the testimony of over 1,000 Alaskans and people from all over the world who have ventured to Alaska and had an encounter with Alaska's hairy man. Fred shared with us that the stories of Sasquatch in Alaska have been an oral tradition for most Alaska Native peoples, and that's been passed down generationally for thousands of years. His work and the testimony he's documented span over many years to present day, covering thousands of miles and varied terrain of the wildest parts of the last frontier. Hundreds of these startling accounts appear on his popular YouTube channel, SubArctic Alaska Sasquatch. It's in a similar oral tradition that he has recounted the experiences of more than 300 people who have had an encounter with Alaska's hairy man. This is Alaska Means Business, and now, Fred Roehl.
I was originally born in Anchorage at the old Native Hospital in '75, and then was because at the time there was no doctors available at Kanakanak Hospital in Dillingham, so my mom had to fly over. Raised in the village, for the most part, subsistence lifestyle. A lot of people would like to romanticize that, but in reality, it's a day-to-day thing versus people might think that we just go out in a big group and go hunt a bunch of caribou and moose, and that's not necessarily how it works, because on the day-to-day you come across spruce grouse or snowshoe hares, and hey, that's a meal. You break up the salmon, caribou, and moose stuff, and like going to the grocery store for us was like going to Disneyland. You know what I mean? Because then you see all the bright colors of the detergents in the toy aisle and all that kind of stuff, but for the most part it was all a guduk and various other native meals. It was different, especially when I moved away from Alaska. To that contrast was real rough. My grandpa, for example, he taught us all as little ones. He would take us one by one and show us how to track, show us what we were looking at, and it came natural, to me anyway. And so in the early '90s, I was helping cousins, relatives, and stuff as far as the guiding thing. Last year alone, I logged 3,400 miles in the state of Alaska, just traveling from here to there and back into here and back over to there and what have you. So I really love Alaska. That's the thing with oral tradition. A lot of people chalk it up to mythology and folklore. Okay, however, there's no wasted words. The stories we're told is for our survival, whether it be about bear, moose, hunting camp, fishing camp, hairy man, little people. It's all for our benefit and our safety. You know what I mean? So I get a little annoyed when someone's like, oh, well, that's mythological. I'm like, no, nothing about it's mythological. They have totems with the Sasquatch along with the wolf and the eagle. I mean, they don't put things in there for nothing. You know what I mean? There's no wasted words in oral tradition. There's just not. We were always warned, don't sit with your back to the woods. Don't follow strange whistles. Don't whistle in the woods. You'll draw them in. The main thing though was never go in the woods alone. Just never, because you open yourself up. They used to tell us, my Aunt Lucy especially used to tell us, they're always watching you and you can't see them. And at first, being a little kid, you don't know how to take that. I'm like, well, who's watching? You look around, who's watching me? And she goes, you won't see them, but they'll be watching you. And if they whistle for you and draw you away, you could get snatched up and eaten. And that was the overall message, but it was beat like a drum over and over. Don't go in the woods alone. Don't follow strange whistles. It was 1983. I remember because it was the same year, a couple months later, that we dealt with some stuff up the Nuyakuk River. But this was right, my grandma's house at the time was right at the end of the runway in Dillingham there, and our cousins, the Andersons, just lived down the hill, and there was a gravel pit between us. And I just went off by myself. I was gonna go work on my little tree house. I had an old fishing brailer. I was steadily nailing to trees, you know, as a little kid. And as I walk around, you have about 70-yard shot once you get on the right trail, and it goes through these alders to get to my little place. And as I came around the brush to go down this trail, it kind of opens up with some tall grass, and then those alders, I thought I saw my uncle at first, my Uncle Leo, because he was like 6'4" at the time, you know. And I'm standing there, I'm like, oh crap, I'm gonna get in trouble for, you know, getting away from the house. And so I kind of stopped, and then I continued walking again. I was just gonna, you know, own up and, you know, let whatever happen. But I got a few more feet, and I look up because I got this weird feeling, and this thing started swaying back and forth. And just as I was getting ready to yell out to say, hey, Uncle, it's me, this thing screamed at me, and it was evident that it was not my uncle. The scream reverberated through everything. I immediately turned around, and I was out of there. You know, that's when I realized how real all the warnings were. We've had them on the house, 1994, less than a mile from where that happened. I was renting a house down by Squaw Creek, and we had one get on the roof. And at first I thought it was one of my drunk cousins because he was supposed to be coming over to hang out with us. We went outside to yell at him, and this thing jumped off the roof into the trees. And it jumped like at least 25 yards, leapt into the trees. And what do you do with that? Like, it's amazing how much stuff goes on that people don't talk about. They'd rather tuck it away than be ridiculed. And to me, that's a shame because, to be honest, I lost my passion for the woods for a while. I had to force myself to go back out in the woods. You know, after our experience in '06, it was really, really hard. But that internal drive to be part of nature and get out there was what allowed me to bridge that and get past it in a certain way. Yeah, it started off just easy peasy. We're going to do a little prospecting, do a little, you know, looking around up on the Nuyakuk River, and we weren't even there. We got there a couple hours before dark, and initially we were going to go, I wanted to go look for a black bear that an elder in Nuyakuk told me there was over a 7-footer. If you see it on a berry patch, get it for me kind of thing. And I was up for that, but we decided to just unload the skiff into this old Fish and Game counting tower station, right? It's back when they used to physically climb the tower and visually count salmon one at a time as they swam by or whatnot. But we're in this little 8-foot square shack, and no sooner than me, my uncle, and cousin got done eating dinner, it was about a half hour after dark, the whole place just went, it creaked real loud like a heavy wind was blowing. However, there was no wind blowing. It just wasn't. And as I look over at my cousin sitting at this little card table playing cribbage and whatnot, I was looking at him, and between his shoulder and the top of the window, I saw darkness move. Now, these windows are 18 inches tall by 24 inches wide. They were repurposed from somewhere, right? Well, after I seen the movement, he said, that ain't funny. He jumps up, he looks at me. I said, no, I saw a movement out there, and we assumed on the Nuyakuk, we were seeing spawn out salmon everywhere. We assumed it was a bear. So, you know, he grabbed 30-06, I had this 12 gauge. And when we went out with the spotlight, when we beamed the riverside first, we saw nothing, and trust, we were looking, and we didn't want to get charged by a bear in the dark. So when we went out the door, we were like literally a step, maybe a step and a half from that doorway with the door still open. When I panned over to the left with that spotlight, we saw 3 sets of eye shine that were like fence post markers, bright red, boom, boom, boom. Immediately we stepped right back inside. When we got inside, I had immediately set down that million candlewatt power spotlight that I was holding, and I was holding my 12 gauge offhand. I had a brand new Remington 870, man. It was my slug gun, rifled barrel, ghost ring sights, you know, hooded front, beautiful stainless, well, brushed stainless, but as soon as I set that down and I'm holding the shotgun, I'm talking to my cousin. I said, "That's a hairy man out there. That's a hairy man." And I'm telling my uncle straight across from me, which is like literally from here to there. And I'm looking at him, and as I'm looking at my cousin, and I'm trying to express what we saw out there, all of a sudden he's under that card table, and it was like he was having a seizure. He was holding the barrel of the 30-06 and just like looking, but we weren't noticing him looking. We were trying to figure out what he's doing on the floor. Well, as me and my uncle look at each other and look down at him, we notice he's looking at the window that's basically right there. You know what I mean? And as we both turn and look, this thing's looking at him and then turns and looks at me. This thing was massive. I only saw from the bottom of the nose to the top of the eyebrow in an 18-inch space. It had ashen gray skin, very wrinkly. What was the most awesome part about it, it was all freaky, but the eyes were like big black translucent marbles, and they had the slightest bit of eye shine from the lamp we had going inside there. So when it turned and looked at me, that's where you could see the dimension to the eyes, you know what I mean? And that's this all happened real fast, but I remember the eyelashes as well were beautiful. They were very symmetrical, very thick, you know what I mean? When it looked at me, I immediately knew what food felt like. It was instantaneous. There was no mind speaker, nothing like that. I just instantly realized, holy crap. And in that moment, I was holding that shotgun offhand, but I put 3 slugs through the wall. The whole place went with a scream. The pot my uncle had made, this salmon chowder, salmon soup, whatever you want to call it, it rang like a tuning fork from that scream. And it almost took me off my feet when the place shifted. I ended up sitting there for 5-6 hours, no communication from my elder. Everyone basically shut down, and I'm sitting here freaked out. It's hard to put into words the terror going through your mind, but the only way I could stop shaking was to resign myself to death. I figured, okay, I'm not seeing the other side of this, so I need to do my best to protect myself in any way I can. But it was one of the hardest times of my life, because my cousin under the table was literally the guy I would never think would fold under that kind of pressure. He had literally stood shoulder to shoulder with me with bears charging, like literally. But he was incapacitated, you know. My elder shut down. I don't know. We never got full explanations from each other outside of little tidbits after that. But so what ended up happening is, after sitting there, my cousin finally comes back to. He's babbling a little bit at first. He had wet his pants. It was all bad. It was really all bad. I had to tell him, hey, I shot it. It ran away. You know, we're good. We're good. So once I got him up, got him changed out, we started planning on getting out of there, you know. And this time of year, it was like September 17th, you know, 2006. Basically 12/12 light cycle up here at that time, right? And so there was still a lot of darkness ahead of us, so we planned on using the spotlight and drifting down, because we didn't want to run into deadfalls with the motor running, stuff like that. So we're initially coming up with this plan, and he's like, well, let's spotlight out the windows and see where they're at before we run to the skiff, because from that shack we walked 20 feet. It drops about a 6-foot drop to the little landing there where our skiff was, and I mean, that's not far. It's from here to there and to just down, you know, but it felt like 10 miles away with considering what was outside. So we get our plan together, and we had to kill that Coleman lantern and beam out the riverside first. We didn't see nothing. Believe me, we were looking. And then we went to the opposite side, where it would be the riverbank side, where we saw the eye shine by the tree line about 50 yards away. We beamed over there and looked real good. We didn't see nothing. As we panned back off of this structure that we were in, which was 8x8 square, regular structure, and there was an old 50 style camper kind of MacGyver to the back of it, right, as the bunkhouse area. All the windows were boarded up just to keep it dark or whatever. And so anyway, off that back corner, there was an old outhouse, and it had been 8.5 feet tall, minimum cuts. I'm sure you've seen stuff in remote Alaska where it looks slapped together with minimal cuts. Very similar concept. But so when we beamed back over there, there was this darkness behind it, and it was so dark you couldn't, it was absorbing light. It was the damnedest thing. I'd never seen anything like it since, but it was like absorbing the light, and then we seen it move, and then you could see it was darker than dark, but you could make out the silhouette. This thing was massive. I'm pretty good with measurements. It was about 13 to 14 foot tall, about 5.5 foot wide, hulking. I mean hulking. And it felt instantly in that moment, I killed the spotlight, and we all retreated back into that cubby. We had barrels crossed. My cousin almost lost it again. He wanted to take a bent nail to nail the door shut, and I'm like, hey, stay with me. That nail isn't doing anything. Just, let's really figure this out. But it was so quiet. There was literally not a sound. We didn't hear it moving or anything. A little while later, with it being calm and whatnot, we calmed down and started this plan again, and we were gonna, make our break for it. Well, in that time, we had lit the lantern briefly to gather up extra ammo and some other stuff we were taking with us, just very little. The bulk of the stuff we ended up leaving there, even my shotgun. But anyway, we get all this stuff together, and we had just killed the lantern again, and we're discussing how we're gonna go about getting to the river's edge, drop down. And when we got there, the skiff that had like a 70-foot line, and we were basically tethered because we had sunk that anchor into the tundra back close, in the direction we'd have to go to the trees, and no one was volunteering to go and pull that anchor, so I told my cousin, take my knife, cut that rope. There was about 12 foot of chain, and the rest was just rope. I said, cut the rope, jump in, fire it up, and I'll help Uncle down, and all that. And so we got that part of the plan together. But as we're talking, we hear what sounds like rotor wash. It's like thump, 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 right? But then we start feeling it in the ground, and we're like, oh, holy crap. It was this thing, it ran by, you could hear it, you could feel it. And as soon as it ran by, the other ones that were around started running around the place in different directions, and you could feel some of them weighed more than others by the impact you're feeling. And in those moments, it was sheer terror, because it seemed like they would run around and then back off, almost like they're gauging to see if we're going to shoot again, but that's speculation in 2020 hindsight, but it makes sense. They're running around to see if we're going to shoot. But the second time they did that, one of them started sniffing the outside of that little trailer. We were tucked in that little cubby. To this day, even my dogs, I love them, I can't have them sniffed by my ear. It's a bad thing, so that calms down. We calm down again, and again start reinstigating this plan to get moving, and it's starting to move towards lighter in the morning. It's not twilight or anything, it's still dark as hell, but the light is changing outside, so we knew we would be okay soon enough with daylight. Get our plans together. We're getting ready to head out the door again. I'm right behind my cousin, Uncle behind me. I had my uncle's old shotgun. He had an old Wingmaster. We just took out the bird shot because he would shoot at ducks and geese on the way up or whatever, and we put slugs in there. And I was holding a 30-06. My cousin had my shotgun and my pocket knife, because again, our plan was he was going to cut the rope, jump in, fire it up, and we'd get out of there. Just as we were literally about to unhook this little J-hook that was holding that little flimsy door shut, we heard rocks. Well, it sounded like someone shooting a pellet gun at the place. Tack, 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 tack. The cadence was real slow, and then it was like a hailstorm. And bam, right back into that little cubby we went. Barrels crossed again. To try to express the level of panic and chaos, it'd be impossible. It took a lot out of us. So once that calmed down, I couldn't tell you exactly how long it took, but there was better than 45 minutes, I know that much. When that calmed down and it was light enough to where we could see that tree line, I was peeking out, looking around. We're little by little, we were coming out of that cubby hole looking, because there was no curtains over the windows. We were trying to look out, see if we see anything moving. And it appeared that they had left. Like looking out the windows. We're a little more comfortable moving in there, looking around. We weren't seeing nothing, so okay, now it's time to go. We go out the door, and you would have swore we practiced this for 30 years, man, because it was bam. We were all together in a tight group, but boom, riverbank, he jumped down. I had set the 30-06 down. I still had that shotgun over my shoulder, but I had my elder come to the outside, the riverbank side, and when I glanced around, I didn't see anything. And so I'm helping him get his footing because, you know, the dew in the morning, you know, overnight and whatnot, it was a cut bank, so it kind of dropped steep for a second. So I allowed him, I was down on one knee, letting him get his footing, and that shotgun butt was pushing me forward a little bit. So I, you know, kicked it back, and I scooted back about 4 to 6 inches. And when I stood up, I you know, grabbed 30-06, I stand up, and this rock, a little bigger than a basketball, all of a sudden went right by my head. When that happened, everything went slow motion. My eyes immediately started tracking the rock. It impacted the river in a spot that was about 3 foot deep. It hit so hard that it hit the bottom before the water could close over it. And the Nuyakuk is a pretty rapid river. And when I turned to the direction that this rock came from, that big black hulking thing was coming out of the trees, and I just assumed that was the one that threw it. Now, at this point, understand I have tunnel vision hard, like everything's just closing in, you know, from the shock, you know. And there was other movement besides that thing, but I immediately, with that 30-06, I put 3 shots on it as it was coming out of the trees. Now, when I shot this 30-06, we've killed walrus, beluga, moose, bear, everything with 30-06. I've never seen something just eat a 30-06 round. This thing took 3 to the center mass because I didn't have face to go by. It was all black. 3 shot center mass, and it just stopped moving forward. It didn't buckle. It didn't flinch. I heard the rounds impact. You know what I mean? So when that happened, at this point, my uncle's down on the skiff, sitting on the edge. The motor is running, and I jump off and land down there, and I notice my shotgun on the ground. And I put the 30-06 in the skiff. He didn't cut the line, and I'm yelling at him, "Throw me my knife, throw me my knife." And as he throws the knife, I'm telling him, "Idle down, idle," because he's trying to shift, and it's idling. It's cold. You know, I said, idle down to shift. There's chaos going on, right? So I cut that line. I put my knife in my pocket, and I'm putting the chain in because there's about 12 foot of it. And I'm telling him, idle down, idle down. I walk over, and I don't mean to sound smug or like it didn't matter. Looking back on it, it's pretty cold, but I shoved my uncle in there, right? Because he was sitting on the edge and slowly swinging. No, it's time to go, you know? When I shoved him in there, it bruised his wrist up pretty good, found out later, but when he got in there, he swung around on his butt and was looking back at me at the bow. I'm looking back, and as I'm looking back, my cousin had just got it shifted, and the shotgun, my shotgun, brand new one I was gonna pick up, that went out of my mind, because as soon as he was able to shift the outboard, I'm looking at them, and both their eyes go real big, and they're looking up above my shoulder, up to the riverbank right behind me. And as I look over my shoulder and I look up, I saw up to about the shin knee area. What was standing there, I didn't see all of it because, again, that tunnel vision, but what I did see was really dark hair, and the tips were like a cinnamon auburn, kind of like a chimpanzee orange kind of color to them. And I push off, and as we were leaving, I'm in the bow of the skiff after I pushed off and jumped in, and I'm looking to reload the 30-06. There was one more round in it, and I had 180 grains, but I'm looking for 220 grains, you know, something a little heavier. But as all that chaos is going on, we were going back and forth, and I thought he was trying to break friction to get up on step, right, you know, a little sooner. And what it was, I found out 15, 16 years later, is they were actively throwing rocks at the outboard. There's a big dent in the transom, the cowling was cracked. At first, you know, when he told me about it, he thought they were throwing rocks at him, but it became evident they were targeting that outboard. And Luckily, we got up on step, got further away, and the further away we got, the less heaviness, and basically that's where it ended. But it destroyed our relationship. It utterly destroyed our tight. We were like three peas in a pod on adventures for many years before that. But it destroyed all of that. You know, grant you there was choice words spoken at certain times of high emotion and whatnot. Especially on my part, I felt alone. I'm like, you know, effing help me. You know, you have a gun too, help me. You know, and it was horrible. You know, and that's another driving force that why I do the channel is to hear people. And grant you, what we went through is pretty damn extreme, but everyone's affected differently, and so that's why I treat how people express their encounter to me the way I do, with the utmost respect, because I truly understand what it feels like to not be heard, not be believed, and all that stuff. You know, anyone with a set of ears, hey, the Nuyakuk River, man, they try to get us. You know, I'm like, understand what I'm telling you, and everyone's just kind of like, what? And then I'm like, hey, so and so was with me. Ask them. And they were clamming up. You know, they were like, you know, and that's when the real separation started, because I'm like, hey, well, you were right there with me, man. Like, what gives? You never know what you're gonna come across in the woods. Me personally, I honestly, I don't care what the next man believes, but if someone was like genuinely curious but skeptical, I would just tell them, hey, well, don't shut your mind down. You know, be open-minded and hear what's actually being said. What I saw looked like a caveman, looked like a Neanderthal. I've racked my brain on what these things could be. When I asked an elder one time, what are they? You know, they said they didn't know, and they've always been here. I honestly, I don't buy into a relic ape or anything like that. I just don't. What I seen didn't look like an ape. You know, it didn't have turned up nostrils. It had a nose like ours, just wider, flatter to the face. There was a very high intelligence in those eyes. Very calculating and cunning. I mean, these things will mimic a known baby to draw women out of their house. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is a level of cunning that is, wow. Grant you, they're not walking around with, you know, smartphones like us, but out in the woods, we ain't keeping up. There's no way we could. We've seen them run at a distance. They had to have been, I mean, we watched one run across the muskeg, and it was spitting up a rooster tail of vegetation and water because of its weight. And on top of that, you know what the muskeg's like. It's like, you know, a mattress on top of the water, you know, with the tundra. And it looked like a rooster tail of material behind it. It was running so fast. You know, I've heard what sounded like Yupik, but they were always at a distance, so you could never make out fully what was going on. But a lot of the noises that were made sounded like it was the Yupik tongue, you know. And one elder I asked about that, they said, oh, they speak the original language we all used to speak, whatever that means, you know. Because I asked for, hey, can you flesh that out for me a little bit? What do you mean? You know, and they're, you know, certain elders, when you ask them questions, they don't want to be questioned back about their answer, you know. It's almost like a don't question me kind of thing, which I get, but, you know, in today's age, we need a little more context behind that, you know what I mean? But I was told it's the original language, and they still speak it, and that's what it is. Yeah, you get reports like from everything from earthy, mossy smells, nothing bad, to the smells like rotted meat mixed with heavy body odor and heavy urine smell. That's the most common one when smells are expressed or shared, you know, during encounters and whatnot. Me personally, I've never smelled that. Well, okay, I have smelled it, but not heavy. It was at an encounter location where it was expressed, but the encounter happened like a week before, but there was still that slight tinge that it was almost like a sweet smell because of the rancid body odor, urine type of scent, you know what I mean? That has been shared, out of the almost 300 videos I've published so far, I would say 6 have expressed they smelled something along those lines. I would say the average height on these things reported is between 10 and 11 foot tall, on up to, I've had people tell me that it was over 15 foot tall. Females seem to be a little more, from my understanding and what I've collected over the time, a little less aggressive. And I actually had one report where a guy, he was, as a little kid, he was missing, and a female, he said, rescued him. And I said, wow, that's awesome. That's one of the first good, stories I've heard about Alaska. How did that feel? He goes, I sensed that they were getting rid of the nuisance. Because in context, there were search and rescue helicopters, planes, all that stuff going on, looking for him. And he felt they were getting rid of the nuisance versus helping. There's been a lot of reports where typically what ends up happening is they're distracted by the visual of one when others are either moving in closer or moving out. I would speculate, yeah, most definitely. The juveniles are actually big, even though they're not overly tall when they're little. Like the tracks we were talking about earlier, I'm 200 pounds. I was in the same consistency because the tracks were made the night before on this guy's way out, and that's how how I was able to get there and record them. But they had to have been over 400 pounds, and their tracks were 11.5 inches long. One of them was 4 inches wide, and the other one was 4.5 inches wide. And in the video, you can see that mid-tarsal. We don't have that. So even if someone claimed, oh, yeah, someone barefoot walking around, okay, fair, explain that, because you could literally see where they were gripping with their whole foot. You know what I mean? Like, it was just stunning. Long toes. A lot of tribes and people in general don't realize we wear shoes so our toes kind of stay at a certain length. But for those who never wear shoes, they get really long toes. It's just how it works out or whatever. But these beings have real long toes up here in Alaska, I should say. I've seen tracks down in the States where it looks like someone just drew it. You know what I mean? But up here, they tend to be a little narrower, especially towards the heel, with real long toes, and that mid-tarsal break, as they call it, is very prominent, each and every one. Oh, definitely big game. Plenty of reports of people with their moose stolen, gut piles getting gone missing. Same with caribou. There's been reports of these things from stealing someone's food to someone hunting for caribou, and all of a sudden one of these things pops up. I actually have a picture from a guy who was out moose hunting, and he saw 5 moose. It was the winter hunt, and he was just taking his pick of which one he was going to shoot. Then all of a sudden a hairy man comes out of the brush, and all of a sudden the moose are slowly moving away from it. I have a picture of that. It's somewhere on the channel or the website. In certain types of primates or whatever, that's their way of building up their confidence, their aggression. So if they're swaying back and forth, they're getting ready to, charge you or something along those lines. And a lot of people didn't make it that far because they were smart enough at swaying and screaming and all that. Most people leave. It's like building up their bravado is what was shared with me. Now, I haven't talked to one personally, but, I'm just going by what was shared. For the overwhelming part, the rock throwing and the showing of teeth, let's be honest, if in that moment they were out to get that person, if they're throwing a tiny little pebble accurately, you already know you're in range, obviously. If they wanted you, they would have had you. You know what I mean? I think a lot of it is a demonstration of their ability without going full on. Like, let you know, hey, you need to go, that type of thing. Showing of the teeth is universal sign of aggression for the most part. Up until modern times when, of course you smile to be cordial and whatnot. Animal pelts tan so well, you would think a professional did it, but there's no cut marks, so obviously they know how to do certain things, you know what I mean? And tanning hides, I believe, is one of them. But I've had reports of these nesting areas with either a structure over them and weird smell on the inside, and ones that are just like ground nests in the open, but all the branches are weaved together so intricately that it's not just a random thing. The wind didn't blow it down that way. It was made that way. You know what I mean? And same with some of the structures. Like, I've been out in the woods and I could tell, oh, a human made that. But other structures you run into, there's something going on there. You know, they're utilizing the branches and stuff in such a way that I don't think the average person would think of that. I've gotten reports of them having bone knives down off the Curyung River, you know, where they were watching them cut the net to pull the fish out. They were stealing fish, you know. I think there is tool usage, but very rudimentary, very primitive, you know. And who knows if they steal knives from people, or who knows what else. You know, I've even had reports of them standing around a fire, and that was in the wintertime, one of the rare wintertime encounters. These two guys are in the military. Their buddies left the day before, or earlier that day. They were supposed to go out near the alphabets for this caribou hunt to find their friends. They said, just look for our fire. They're in the general area. They see a fire. They hike up there. When they get there, they initially see what looks like snowshoe tracks in the snow, and no one's around. Then all of a sudden they notice these things are just right inside the tree line, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, the scramble to get out of there and all that, but reports of them using fire, you know. Alaska is one of those places where you could truly make your own opportunity. You really can. You just got to think outside of the box. You can't necessarily work for the next guy and make something happen. Sometimes you gotta, well, I'll use myself as an example. I got out of carpentry, and I've always known about the hairy man. And I was listening to some stories from down on the lower 48, and I was like, this doesn't sound like what I've dealt with and what I've heard others talk about. And so I jumped on that. I've never talked to anybody who said, oh, it was a great time. Never. Even law enforcement, former military. I spoke to a federal investigator who only heard pounding on the back of the White Moose Lodge up in Healy. He was a guest. He was on his way back from Fairbanks. His words were, I've been to the sandbox, anti-terror, multiple, you know, combat missions, yada, yada. This thing was banging on the back of the wall, and I felt like a scared 5-year-old boy. And he said, I didn't even see it. It was that primal fear. It is surreal. When you get an email from Saipan, when you get an email, actually there was a guy, Fritz, in Finland. He had found old journals from his great-great-grandpa or something along those lines. He went through the trouble to get a hold of me from Finland. We weren't communicating too well. He went and hired an interpreter from the university there to talk to me and convey what they were reading out of there. The hair stands up on the back of my neck thinking about it. Like, it's surreal. It really is, because I'm just Fred in Alaska, and people will call my number because I leave it on the channel, and they're like, you answer your own phone? I'm like, yeah, that's why it's there. I don't have a call center. It's real difficult for me to just go, hey, I'm Fred from Alaska. I got a YouTube channel, check it out. For the most part, I'll fill someone out and say, hey, you know, and then I'll lead into that. But as far as just, if I was to just start talking to someone on an elevator, I'd point out that and grant you, it's not a very large YouTube channel compared to others, but you know, I have I think over 4 million total views, almost 1 million watch time hours, like almost 1 million. And I sit there and think about it, like, damn, that's a lot of hours, you know, and it's averaging like 58,000 hours per month of watch time. That's significant. You know what I mean? For people to invest in that. It makes the guy feel good. It makes me feel like I'm in the right direction. But my thing is to remain as authentic and just straightforward as possible. For most people, they've had an experience, and they do their research online looking, and then they had something happen in Alaska, and they type in Alaska and whatnot, and I pop up. And so they start watching and feel me out, so to speak, and then they reach out to me. We have multiple phone calls before I even record, you know, their encounter, if it goes that route. And the main part is the phone calls, because they usually last a couple hours each for the first few, and then the rest of it's just little tidbits when they have time. And sometimes the preparation for one video could be 9 months in the making because of schedules and getting back and forth. And if someone reaches out and they only tell me their experience one time, I don't showcase it on the channel. And it's not to take away from their experience, it's I need more. To do it the way I do it, I need every little bit of information. Over 1,000. And 2/3 at this point, it was just to get it off their chest versus having anything public remotely. Even if I offer to change their name and leave them anonymous, they just want to get it off their chest. I said, even if you don't want a video made, give me a call. I'll hear you out, because like there's people that self-medicate over their stuff, because who do they go to? And they got this stuff inside, so they go to their best friend kind of whatever, Then what do they do with that? They internalize it, they start self-medicating if it was real traumatic, and I would hate for that to happen. They usually try to convince you you're misidentifying a bear. Yeah, but bears don't throw rocks. You know what I mean? There's a big difference. SubArctic Alaska Sasquatch, and it's SubArcticAlaskaSasquatch.com. The interactive map, that map, if you zoom in on a pinpoint, a marker pin, it's actually embedded with my YouTube channel. You could click right on it and it'll play the encounter video from the location. Again, I rarely advertise that because, again, with what I'm dealing with people's traumas and stuff. But yeah, there's definitely a selection of merchandise there. There's an ebook available, which was really different for me because the people that step forward to facilitate that, because that's not in my wheelhouse, you know what I mean? And that's another thing about the business aspect, is relying on others when you're not used to it is kind of hard to do, but you get the right people, man, and it's good things, you know what I mean? Yeah, definitely. YouTube isn't a place you can get rich, and I didn't set out to get rich. There's something about talking to people with traumas and all this stuff going on in their lives and a lot of confusion, to where I would feel like a used car salesman, like I have 2 web stores I don't even talk about, that type of thing. I find it hard for me to self-promote when I am literally sharing someone's worst day. You know what I mean? So it makes it hard. Hey, this happened to Miss Carol. Buy my coffee mug. Don't be scared. I don't want anyone to watch my videos and be scared of Alaska. No, it's like being bear aware. There's far more full-on documented bear attacks in Alaska versus the hairy man. The ones about the hairy man are all speculation and whatnot. It's just like being bear aware. Just be aware. You never know. You never know what you're going to run into.
You can support Fred's work by subscribing to his YouTube channel, SubArctic Alaska Sasquatch, and check out his website and interactive map and video experiences at SubArcticAlaskaSasquatch.com. That's where you can go to get in touch with Fred to share your Alaska hairy man encounter. Thanks to Fred for sitting down with us. If you have a sighting of other extraordinary Alaskans doing interesting things, you can tell us here at Alaska Means Business. Nominate them to be featured in an upcoming episode at AlaskaMeansBusiness.com.